Joining us, Andy Hunder, director of the Ukrainian Institute in London, which advises companies on how to do business in the country. Can we think about this as a country anymore?
Absolutely. I mean, Ukraine is an independent country with the new government in place now. So I think the new government now, what its main focus is, the main challenges will be. I mean, this government has been branded as a kamikaze government. Why? Because the challenges it faces are massive. Firstly, from a political aspect, economic and geopolitical. I think the events that we are seeing in Crimea at the moment are really serious. I think the issue is behind this is Russia and President Putin. So far, this is probably one of the biggest defeats on a foreign policy defeat for President Putin. So I think we'll see some more disturbances coming from Russia in order to add a bit of fuel.
But your sense is the territorial integrity will be maintained, that this is not a secessionist story we're talking about here?
Ukraine became independent in 1991. When it was independent, it has the third largest nuclear arsenal in the whole world.
The deal was?
And yeah, the arsenal, just to give you a sense of the size of the arsenal, it was bigger than China, the UK and France combined, the nuclear arsenal. It gave it up voluntarily in exchange for assurances from the United States, the United Kingdom and Russia in terms of its territorial integrity and sovereign, so it remains a sovereign state. So I think the country, yes. What will happen with Crimea? I think, we will really, the US, EU will really need to monitor that very closely.
But even if the Russians don't get involved and we see a secessionist movement developing, it's going to be hard to deal with that, even given the agreement that was made post the fall of the Berlin Wall. If they decide that they want to secede, maybe people don't recognise them, but nevertheless you could see a split in this country, and that obviously forms problems for those trying to do business with it.
I think over the last 23 years these issues haven't arisen. It's been very peaceful. There haven't been any issues in Crimea at all. Now, and when we're seeing that Russia is really putting the pressure on Crimea, I think that's when the issues arise. So if this is no external forces are pushing this, I think the situation will be resolved.
Let's talk about the financial situation. Clearly very difficult. We've learned that from the central bank this morning. Reserves are not going to last that long, so a deal needs to be done. How brutal will the IMF, a fund with a very difficult history with the Ukraine, be with this country?
I think we've got to understand the size of Ukraine. Ukraine's a very big country. It's bigger than France. I think what we will see is a new economy appearing in Europe. I think a new economy because the Prime Minister, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, yesterday said that about 70 billion had been stolen from the country over the course of the last 3 years. It's a lot of money. I mean, the question is, where has that money gone? Okay, some of it's somewhere in cash, some of it's... so I think that's a different issue. But I think the future of the Ukrainian economy now, what we're seeing now, the new government, it is a pro-reform government with Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk, even the Minister of Economy, Pavlo Sheremetyev. These are real reformists, and I think they're going to drive this country forward. It's going to be tough. That's why they are being called the kamikaze government. They will not be popular. But I think the issue is that neither of them are going to run for president in May. So they are ready to take the hit, and the reforms where the people, the electorate may not be very popular, but the economy that's going to really focus on.
If I was a bondholder, what kind of haircut, what kind of a cut in my capital can I expect?
I think in the short term, I think it depends what happens next week also with the IMF. I mean, the Prime Minister says today that they will adhere to all IMF conditions. I think in terms
which would be a novelty. Because that hasn't happened in the past.
Well, I think in terms of gas subsidies for domestic consumption, I think a lot of reform. Because the previous government and the previous president, they were focusing on populist measures. To increase gas prices for the population is not a popular move. No. And when you're getting ready for a presidential election, as these guys were, I think so. Interesting also to see that Klitschko, who is a real contender for the big job for the presidency in May, he is not part of the government. So he is sort of standing slightly back. He's giving it vocal support. But I think, in the mid-term, in the long term, this could be a big economy coming up.
Just to come back to the question, are we going to see bondholders having to take haircuts? Like you talk about the pain that's going to have to be felt by the general public. There's going to be cuts in the gas subsidies. Are bondholders going to have to participate in that as well?
I think in terms of potential defaults, there's a lot of talk about that going on at the moment. I think with IMF coming next week, I think it's going to be they'll find a solution to it. I think in terms of the sovereign lending and sort of others, I think we'll see what happens over the next couple of days. These are many of the people in the government now, they are Western focused, they have an understanding of how the market works, and they are open to investors.
Sure.
And I think
but are bondholders going to have to take haircuts?
I think we'll see over the next couple of days. I think
right.
the Minister of Economy and the Minister of Finance is their first day in office, literally.
Okay.
So I think it's very, very difficult to.
Are the Russians gone as a financial force in this country?
I think the terms on which they've been promising the money, the 15 billion that was promised, the 2 billion that was delivered, I think it's going to be, some of the Russian banks are likely to still be around. I think the question is that the terms on which Russia provides the money, i.e. we give you money, you give us, you become a member of the customs union. I think that is out of the window. There is talk now that Ukraine is pretty much ready to sign an association agreement with the EU moving forward, the free trade agreement with the EU. I think that is more likely. So that is not going to make many people in Moscow very happy. But I think in terms of custom union, I can't see that happening. So if those were the terms that Russia was giving the money, that's not going to happen. So I think it's really now focusing on the IMF and sort of Western lenders.
Andy, nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Andy Hunder, Director of the Ukrainian Institute in